She is the chairwoman of the board of the recently formed Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, which is essentially looking at Canada's firearm laws, telling the government gun owners are not violent people, gun owners are not criminals. We are sportsmen and women, sport shooters, hunters, neighbors, collectors, people that are not benefiting, they're people for whom it's not benefiting the country to make life more difficult. And we've seen a number of cases of government in recent years, and the RCMP specifically, because the previous Conservative government was much better on firearms issues than this one has, but we've seen RCMP really turn people into regulatory offenders, changing classifications of guns. A ridiculous one just a couple of weeks ago with one of the most popular guns in existence we'll talk about as well. But I want to welcome to the program the gun goddess herself, Tracey Wilson of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Tracey, thank you so much for coming on the show. Great to talk to you.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk first off about the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, because we have a number of organizations like the NFA and the Shooting Sports Association that are tackling some of these issues here. What is it that has been missing that led to this group being formed?
Okay, well, thanks for your question. What we are trying to do, the CCFR, are trying to open a conversation that is fact-based, mature, and rational about civilian firearm ownership in Canada. Now, this has never really taken place. You know, we've got groups that do lobbying and, other types of activities. I think it's about time, that we just sit down and have a nice, honest, rational conversation. We've created something a little more sophisticated than what we've had in the past as far as advocacy groups, and we're a lot more media savvy than what we've seen in the past.
And when you talk about that conversation component, this is a big one because so many Canadians, I find, are under so many misconceptions about firearms. For starters, I couldn't tell you how many people I've interacted with who say, oh, well, guns are illegal in Canada. And, well, no, they aren't. I own a couple myself. People just don't understand what the laws are, and they're calling in some cases for changes to the law that already exist in Canada because so much is really, for a lot of Canadians, it seems like fed from what they see in U.S. media.
Absolutely. We see this all the time. The newly formed, or the new government, the Liberals, they promised us a fact-based, scientific, data-driven lawmaking process, and we do support that. The CCFR is here to provide statistics and factual information and help this conversation move in that fact-based direction. Our members, in fact, funded a new website, gundebate.ca, with their own dollars, just to provide people who are interested with numbers and facts. This is open to everyone, whether you're a member or not. And we consider it sort of a repository of information.
What do you find some of the biggest misconceptions are that you've tackled in this website, which are really professionally put together, by the way? It's very well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're proud of that. Well, here's the thing. There's a lot of, a lot of laws that are formed that actually, they don't focus on criminals. Here's an example for you. Let's say I leave my wallet at home with my RPAL card, leave that home on the counter. It can happen very easily. You're in a rush to get out the door. I can be imprisoned for 2 years. If I was to get pulled over and have firearms in my vehicle without that piece of plastic, this is information that the officer has access to in his car, same as the driver's license. But without that piece of plastic in my wallet, I can look at facing up to 2 years in prison. 400 people per year are charged with documentation offenses. These are victimless crimes, but they're criminal code charges, weapon charges. These are super serious sanctions for forgetting my wallet. I'd like to know, how does this enhance public safety?
Especially when they can run your name and say, oh, yes, you are Tracey Wilson. You're actually a law-abiding gun owner. You have your license. Everything's fine. They know that in their system, but are still charging people.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So how does that, enhance public safety versus, some gangbanger in Toronto shooting up a shopping mall with an illegal handgun? These are the things that we should be concentrating on, actual crimes.
So I guess this brings around some of the regulatory issues we've seen as well. I mean, I look at a couple of weeks ago, for example, one of the big changes being made was quote-unquote high-capacity magazines for 1022s. I mean, this is a type of gun which is one of the most entry-level shooting guns, shoots 22 long rifle ammunition. You can get, in addition to the standard 10-round magazine, you can get 25, even 100-round ones. It's not a fully automatic firearm. And now these are illegal. Only the 10K, as I understand, or the 10 round, as I understand it, is allowed now, which has overnight turned people into criminals.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, there's over 2 million licensed firearm owners in Canada. Did we receive any kind of notice or information on this from the RCMP? No, we didn't. My opinion is the RCMP is there to enforce laws, not necessarily to make them. However, if you're going to be given that power, it comes with a certain responsibility, to inform people. And these decisions, like I said, should be based on, on scientific data, like data driven, not on emotionally charged. Here's the thing. I've got an entire bucket of those megs up at my hunt camp. The kids loved plinking cans with them and having a good time, up in the back 40 with that. Well, suddenly you've got, over 100,000 people in this country who own these magazines who are now technically paper criminals. They've done nothing wrong. Nobody's in danger. There's no, public safety issue at hand. In fact, there's not even any data to show that these types of magazines were ever used in a crime. Yeah. And
let's say if you're going to go on a mass shooting, you're not bringing a 22. This is, I think, something that most people need to be aware of as well.
Exactly. It's not much more powerful than airsoft or BB guns, things that the kids usually have up in the country and places like that. But yeah, I just don't understand the logic with one swipe of the pen. You've created 100,000 criminals essentially.
So you've mentioned that there are more than 2 million firearms owners in Canada, which basically means 1 in 15. If we break it down to actual adults, we're dealing with quite a sizable chunk of the population here, and about 800,000 restricted firearms, as well as coming up on 185,000 prohibited firearms, and unrestricted we don't know the exact number of, but obviously in Canada I've heard that per capita ownership of long guns is among the highest in the world. And in spite of this, we had 156 firearm-related homicides in 2014, despite millions of guns in the hands of Canadians.
That's right. I mean, if we were a problem, you'd know it. There's 36 million people in Canada. 300, people die every day. 350,000 people die every year in Canada. You have 24,000 people die from medical mistakes, 250,000 from cancer, and we've got an average of 150 die from firearm-related homicides. When it comes to guns, we don't measure the impact of anything else in the same manner. They sensationalize guns to sell papers that make sexy headlines. But why don't we treat any other variables that contribute to human death in the same manner? We don't.
What do you attribute the disparity between Canada numbers and U.S. numbers to? Because this is the one thing that people will look at the U.S.'s gun-related homicide rate, and they show this as evidence. And every time there's a story of a mass shooting, I know you as a gun owner basically get hit with these questions of, how can we at all support making guns more attainable or more accessible when we have these types of shootings? When we look at the numbers, though, how do you explain that disparity?
Well, I'm not an expert in the U.S. situation. I am an expert in the Canadian situation. We have our president, Rod Giltaca. He's a little more versed on that. But I will say that we've got an estimated 14 million gangbangers in the United States of America. If they had a coordinated effort, they could take over the country. This is a major, major problem. 96% of offenders with firearms are not licensed offenders. So again, we're skirting around the issue of actually having legislation that has an impact on crime.
So what would you like to see? Because beyond the conversation, what's the end game? Are you trying to change the legislation to make gun ownership a little bit more easy, or are you just trying to do an educational mission, or are you trying to just make sure things stay the way they are?
Well, here's the thing. We really don't want to lose anything more than we already have, but we are a law and order group. We're not renegade people. I have no problem abiding by the law. In fact, I've been doing it my whole life. I've got no criminal record. I've Never, I'm not an angel, but I've never done anything like that. So to be continuously bombarded with, different legislation and different roadblocks just to enjoy a simple sport that, there's nothing more Canadian. Hockey isn't even as Canadian as firearms ownership. It's, I just want to see some serious work happen in combating crime. And stop sugarcoating it that with firearms ownership.
What would you like to see as being
make an impact?
What would you like to see as being the government's approach on this file?
Well, I'd like to see the government, I'd like to see the government spend some time talking to, people who are experts in this field, not just lawmakers, not just guys in suits up on Parliament Hill, but speak to some of the people that are out here every day and, use the statistics and the information that's there. Everything I've quoted today is available on StatsCan.
Yeah, this is the government's own data here.
Yeah, that's right. So let's take that data that you've compiled and use it to make some proper legislation. That's what I'd like to see.
So I got to ask before I let you go, where did this gun goddess title come from? Because I must say I love it. Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'm loving it or not. It came a couple of years ago. It was sort of a Twitter joke. It's been on there forever, but to be honest, there's the story in the paper. I had no idea that we'd blow that up with great big letters, gun goddess. I'm a lot of things, and I've been called all kinds of names, but goddess probably isn't one of them. But all right.
Yeah, I'm just a regular lady. I'm a mom and a grandma, and I work at a law firm, and I'm not nearly as exciting as they'd like to think I am. But
well, you're doing a lot of really important work, so we'll scrap that title in favor of the official one. Chairwoman of the board of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, CCFR. You can get more information, not just about the organization, but about the debate at hand at gundebate.ca. Tracey, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me, Andrew, and you enjoy the rest of the day.
Will do. That was Tracey Wilson from the CCFR.